Hi, this is the Formative Assessment Podcast number 4. We're looking at Shirley Clarke's book, Outstanding Formative Assessment, Culture and Practice. And I'm working through the chapters, the key concepts, and I'm unpacking them and trying to elaborate on some of them. And in the last podcast, we looked at learning intentions, success criteria. And today we're going to look at developing excellence and going beyond the success criteria. And thinking about some of the limitations and some of the tweaks for what we can do with success criteria. So to begin, apologies to George Orwell, I took this from him. You can press pause to think, to discuss, but I want you to look at this piece of writing and look at the success criteria on the right and say, why is this a successful piece of writing? Objective considerations of contemporary phenomenon compel the conclusion that success or failure in competitive activities exhibits no tendency to be commensurate with innate capacity, but that a considerable element of the unpredictable must invariably be taken into account. Well, I think that all the success criteria are met. Does that make this a successful piece of writing? Okay, that's one example of a starter. Here's a different example of a starter. Which is the most successful piece of writing and why? So on the left we have the same one, and on the right we have, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favour to men of skill, but time and chance happeneth to them all. What, if we had more time, we could explore. Obviously, if we were in a classroom, we would discuss. But what I'm really hoping that you can extrapolate from this exercise is two things. Success criteria and excellence are not the same thing. So even though you meet all the success criteria for something, it doesn't actually mean it's any good. That's a problem. That's something we got to think about. One way of helping articulate what's good sometimes is by putting two things next to one another, like we've done here. And sometimes this aspect of comparison can sometimes yield greater meaning. What would we do with this? Well, from this, we would get students to discuss, I would get you to discuss or analyze. And perhaps we would co-construct or adapt our success criteria and add to it, let's say, clarity or repetition or simplistic language. I don't know. But I always want to put a caution on co-construction of success criteria because you have to remember that you're still the teacher facilitating an understanding of what's going on in the classroom. And what you don't want is for complete co-construction where the students pick things that are wrong. So co-construction is a skill that you're going to need to practice and play with and to make sure that it stays on target. So today what we're going to be doing is we're investigating excellence beyond the success criteria. And what we've started by looking at already are some of the limitations of success criteria, that you can meet all the success criteria and still not be excellent. Oh no, what are we going to do? Well, one thing we can do is compare examples of excellence and less excellent or less successful piece of writing to help deepen the understanding or construct the success criteria in the minds of the student, or in fact, in the teacher themselves. What actually am I looking for? Sometimes putting two things next to one another helps do that. You know, when you put two examples that are far away, like the one we just did, it can particularly articulate something. When we go for something more complex, maybe two examples that are both successful, but for different reasons, might be another way of thinking about how to get your students to think about excellence. But this is all, this takes us to this next part of what I'm trying to talk to you about, which is instead of doing a quiz for this podcast, what I'm going to do is kind of consolidate what we've been doing and what we should be thinking about, what we agree on, what we think a good lesson should look like, and what we will discuss, what we should have in terms of our dialogic conversation about what it means when we see one another teach. So let's review for a second. What does excellent teaching look like? I think it's really worthwhile reviewing what Robert Coe called poor proxies of learning. Students are busy. Lots of work is done, especially written work. Their students are engaged. They're getting attention. The classroom's ordered. Often we think a quiet well-behaved classroom is one where things are going well, where students are learning. All the curriculum is covered. It's all shown to be covered. And at least some of the students have supplied correct answers, whether or not they completely understood them or could reproduce them independently. All of these are worth you thinking about, because there's a lot of common misconception about what is and isn't good learning. And I would prefer that all of us, including myself, start from a point of saying, well, I don't know. I don't know what good... I have my own biases and my own ideas, but if I go with Robert Coe, look, there's so many biases we have for what we think a good lesson should have. And what I've been trying to do in these podcasts is try to bring into this idea of formative assessment as a kind of overarching framework to think about a common language for what learning could look like. And so far what we've talked about is metacognition, talk, and learning intentions. Metacognition, growth mindset, students as owners of their own learning, talk as a way of articulating, giving evidence of what's going on in the lesson. In the next podcast, we're going to look at questioning, and learning intentions, success criteria. If these podcasts have persuaded you that these are important things, then they're exactly what we should expect when we see one another teaching. There should be no rubric or grading. All must, some could, possibly a grade from 0 to 10. These things should be seen. What should be seen? I need to articulate them to you. So if I were to articulate them, they'd look something like this. I want teachers to have moments of reflection and thought. I want students to have deep learning. I want students to have a culture of self-control and regulation, resilience, and growth mindset. I want students and teachers to constantly demonstrate that they're learning throughout the lesson. Questioning should be provoking thought, discussion, and teacher responsiveness, listening. Teacher and student should be able to articulate what success and learning looks like. Okay, let's say these were the things I was looking for. This is so far what I built up to. Then what I'd want if I were to observe you or for you to observe me is to solely look at these criteria, none of the proxies, none of the things that we think are learning. And what we'd look for is evidence, whether it's in the book or moments that were in the lesson or moments to reflect on. And if they're there, great. And if they're not there, we talk about it in a critical and constructive way. And we talk about what are strategies that the teacher is going to employ to be able to meet these criteria. Because these are the things we agree should occur in a lesson, or let's say we do. I mean, we do need to agree on something at some point. And what I'm trying to offer to you, and again, why it's really important to think about the theory, why it's really important to think about the practice, why it's really important to think about these as well-trod ideas that deserve treatment in lessons, is this gives us something to talk about. And crucially, there's nothing high stakes involved. So if something, you don't see something or it's not there, it's a conversation about, well, what could have improved this lesson in terms of these criteria, and what do you need to know, what do you need help with understanding to implement those changes. So all this is accumulated to this so far. And again, I'd invite you to pause and think about and be critical. What would your rubric, what would your success criteria or definition of good learning look like? I'm not done, but again, I wanted to post this to you as a way of saying, okay, here we are. So again, I'd pause you here, think about what you're looking at, put some pressure on this. I can send this along if you need it. So we've looked at these so far. Now let's think about what are the problems with rubrics and mark schemes. Okay, so this is from Ashman from I think it's a blog he writes. Here we have in blue expert performance in a complex domain. I'm thinking now, once again, of teaching, or you could think of any activity or your subject. When an expert performs, it's sometimes difficult to figure out what they're excellent at. And what we do is we start to identify certain features and highlight them to say, okay, this is what makes this expert good in this very complex domain of behavior. And we identify these factors, and then we isolate these factors, and we say, okay, these are the things that the student or the teacher needs to do to reproduce excellence. And it's false, and it really doesn't. It kind of reduces excellence to these lowest common denominators, and this is a problem with rubric. This is one problem with rubrics. Another problem with rubrics and mark schemes is that they're generic descriptors, and assessment objectives in the mark scheme don't always provide us with enough specific meaning to articulate how students could improve. So they are designed as descriptors of performance in a summative assessment. They're not always the most helpful vehicles for understanding how a student can get to the next stage of growth. It's probably less helpful to give a student, and I know it's become common practice in the UK, for example, to give students the mark scheme. But I'd say for both teacher and student, it's probably less helpful to do that than to give them a variety of examples of performance and explore the reasons why performance was strong and to investigate that. And again, further, our teaching should appeal to the whole domain, not just the sample one. Now, it's understandable that in the exam, ultimately there are certain things that will be assessed, but to become an expert or to become fully strong at something, to only focus on the assessment objectives may be a limiting factor, both in approaching your subject and the curriculum as a whole. So someone who thinks about this a lot is Daisy Christodoulou, who I spoke of in the last podcast. She talks about exams are being only samples of wider domains. And because they're samples, there's always going to be ways of kind of gaming or doing well on them that don't lead to genuine learning. Daniel Koretz, who's quite a remarkable writer on this, adds, this is particularly disadvantaging. This is particularly happening in disadvantaged schools. Schools that serve disadvantaged students engage in more test prep and therefore inflate scores more, creating an illusion that the gap in achievement between disadvantaged and advantaged children is shrinking more than it is. Because there is a difference between the performance on an exam and actual genuine learning and exposure to the curriculum as a whole, and you can see Daisy Christodoulou's work is obviously having an impact on how Ofsted has reconceptualized what they're looking, or what they claim to be looking at. I think we can debate that another time. As long as we set our end goal as mastery of a particular domain, then exams will be a valid measure of the goal. The moment we start to target the exam, then the exam will stop being a valid measure. Tests are not direct measures of the domain, only samples. Teaching to the test is therefore a major threat to the validity of most of the inferences we want to make. So this is really hard for us who are in inner city English schools, who are trying to get our students the highest possible attainment, and are driven in a game of that, because we are pulled between these two posts. But we have to pause here and think about what is our aim? What are we doing, and what are we aiming for? And we got to think about how doing well in the exam is just not adequate. Now, it's not adequate, so not only because the language of the curriculum and the shifting ethos of Ofsted is making it inadequate. It's inadequate because it's not giving our students the full domain of knowledge, and maybe disadvantaging them to actually truly learning and ultimately attaining more. And something Christodoulou thinks about is how can we create assessments to measure progress on the journey that aren't solely these summative tests that don't offer us enough information on the things we can do to improve our students' understanding. So I'm going to take you back to this notion from the structured outcome of learning and solo taxonomy that we talked about last time. And I'm going to posit to you, okay, to think about what are the habits of mind, predispositions, mentalities, skills, and knowledge that your subject is aiming at, and what does excellence look like in your subject? So for me, the vision for English, the study of English language and literature, is an education of the imagination through the study and analysis of literary texts alongside the investigation, usage, and analysis of expository writing in English. That's a vision statement. It doesn't maybe have enough meat on there for you, but notice how different this is than to say, I want my students to do really well on the GCSE or the A-level exam, because that is a quite limited domain. I actually have a vision for English that's quite larger than that. Now, once I draw that into a particular key stage, so here's an idea of what it may look like in Key Stage 4 using these solo ideas. Instead of thinking about this idea of sequencing, which just grabs so many people's imagination, might we think about things in terms of progression, where I think of certain skills that I'd like to see identified in Key Stage 4 and how they progress over those key stages. That helps me articulate and understand what excellence looks like and the journey towards excellence in my subject. So of course you can pause here and you can look and you could bring pressure on these. This is how I see the way things progress in Key Stage 4 that isn't solely based on performance in the exam. And in doing this, I'm another writer I think you should look at and is really interesting and worth thinking about is Berger in this book, a really amazing book, Ethic of Excellence. In it, he says, it's not enough to make a list, a rubric of what makes a great essay or a good science experiment. This is an important step, but it doesn't leave a picture, a vision, an inspiration. If I want my students specifically to write a strong essay, to design a strong experiment, I need to show them what a great essay or experiment looks like. Great. This is what he talks about in this book, which is giving students examples of excellence and creating an ethic or a culture, a demand on students of excellence. So he says, okay, how do some schools, why are some students handing in multiple drafts of essays or projects or materials, or they don't stop trying to improve, whereas others, they hand in sloppy things. And he says, well, it simply is normalized that we demand excellence, and that's a cultural shift. And for him, this is the craft of beauty. Of creating in the minds of students that excellence is something to strive for, that quality over quantity. We are in a system that seems to prioritize quantity, that students create beautiful work, portfolios of excellence, things that show off really what it is that they can do and what they're expected to do. And it is through their own work that their self-esteem will grow for Berger. And he really sees that notion of growth mindsets and the esteem of excellence and perseverance really coming from the work itself. And it's a book worth looking at. This is an example, very famous example of his, of giving feedback to a boy. I think it's a boy, Austin's Butterfly. I think that it's a young boy, and that there in the top left-hand corner is his first draft of a drawing of a butterfly. And in subsequent drafts, he's continued to get feedback till he creates the final drawing, his sixth draft in the bottom right-hand corner. Obviously, this is over a stage of time, what we can see immediately is a culture of excellence, of course, that talk must have been crucial for this process. You can see him on YouTube if you want, talking about how he does this. The notion of progression to excellence, that there is a model of progression for this teacher, and perhaps there was an example of excellence. Now that I have this example, I could show this to students. This is what we're aiming at. Not only this is what we're aiming at, this is the necessary process we need to go on to get here, because excellence isn't simply a set of success criteria, but it's an idea and an embodiment, an ethic of what's going on in the classroom. Royce Sadler wrote something really pertinent to this conversation, or it's not a conversation, it's me talking, but okay. The essential conditions for improvement are that the student hold a concept of quality roughly similar to that held by the teacher, is able to monitor continuously the quality of what's being produced during the act of production itself, and has a repertoire of alternative moves or strategies to draw at any given point. So that's a really, you got to unpack that. But really what's remarkable here is the notion that the student's notion of excellence and quality is the same as the one that's held in the teacher's mind, and that the student is able to monitor continuously what they're doing while they're doing it, and has a repertoire or different techniques to reach that level of excellence. So here we again have self-regulation, perseverance, but also this idea of repertoire and excellence. How does the teacher share this concept of quality with their students? Well, they should make it explicit. They should make it visible. So what I would argue you should have, or I think what Shirley Clarke argues as well, what you should have is a clear vision. All teachers need a clear vision and a bank of examples that demonstrate excellence. I'll take you back to my solo. I can articulate what it is that I believe the journey from Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 5 looks like in English. And because I can articulate that, when I'm in the presence of a student at a certain level, I can think about how to take them to the next level. That vision is in my mind. Part of my teaching has to be to make these visions as explicit in my learning intentions, in my teaching of those skills, and in giving them examples as much as possible. So so too with students, so too with teachers. We all can grow in our ability to understand, in our ability to share, in our ability to make this notion of excellence vivid and real for our students. We can do that through modeling, and we're going to talk in a second about the idea of the visualizer being a crucial tool here. Checking and commenting on student work, not just in terms of the traditional feedback in the book, but actually while the learning is going on. We create a bank of excellence. Every unit, we take students' work, we scan it, we keep it, we share it, and we create this bank of excellence so that students see what excellence looks like very vividly. And we use this excellence to use for teacher moderation as well. We can use end-of-year exams to function as moderation, blind without the marks, to understand which example is better and why, and when the moderator, the head of department, or whoever's running moderation can demonstrate or understand where teachers themselves have differing opinions of what excellence looks like. That has to be standardized. That has to be shared. The sense of quality that the student needs to understand, that the teacher holds, must be one that is held throughout the department and then throughout the country, I would say too, that we have this shared notion of quality. Granted that excellence can look differently, but that's why occasionally we all need to get together and look at and moderate together to come to some shared understanding of excellence. Not just for the teachers, then the students themselves can engage in that moderation. So for example, when I give back PPEs, mocks, or big tests, big essays, where students have had to demonstrate or their understanding and learning a great deal, and I've had to spend a lot of time assessing. I try to keep those scripts completely blank and keep my notes elsewhere, so that when I give them their scripts back, and we engage in moderation together using excellence, a bank of excellence, when they start to understand what makes an answer good or less good, they return to their responses and engage with them. And when we go to feedback, I think we should talk about this more, which is why is it the teacher the only one who's delivering that sense of excellence? It's something the student needs to engage in as well. Now, surely Clarke says, look, it's not about, okay, there are problems with success criteria, but that doesn't mean we throw it out. We still use success criteria for any particular writing form. The analytic essay, the informational text, the persuasive essay, the evaluative essay, the personal reflection, the experiment, the project. Students still need to know what should be included. And with these and what should be included is a set of clarified success criteria. It could be process-based or product-based. It could be open or closed. What these success criteria offer us is a way of making the feedback clear and consistent. And further, I would argue that the teacher knows that these things need to be taught. These things that you're calling success need to be explicitly taught. The secretarial features, spelling, handwriting, grammar, punctuation, these should be, or whatever that looks like in your subject, the literacy, I guess. These are the things that we should have every time we write. But when we give feedback, we need to separate these skills from the task itself. Usually when I'm first getting students to engage in self-assessment or peer assessment, they love to be obsessed with the handwriting, and it's not. The handwriting or these secretarial features should not be confused with the task itself. And finally, what we have in addition to these is the intangible elements of excellent writing in your subject. The student needs to see them. They need to have examples of them. They need to have many different examples so that they know excellence can be done in many different ways. And these are models for them, and they're ways of getting them to think about, articulate, and know that they can achieve success. That's what these models offer us. The Visualiser then, is the number one tool that you can have to make your lesson dialogic. It's real-time writing and modeling. I'm just going to do this with you here. So here's my Visualiser. I'm just going to write down Visualiser's rule. You get to real-time. Here, I'll just give you that real-time model. That could be me to you. I can use randomization and get the student work up on the Visualiser, and we can look at it. We can correct, so you can model, you can correct errors in real time, give feedback to the whole class. Again, you're using randomization, you're creating a culture of no shaming and no opt-out. And then further, you can use student work to discuss and evaluate. You can use the success criteria to actually look at and get students to talk about and discuss what's going on, what makes work strong, what could improve it, and forcing them into that thought process deepens the learning and gets them to take ownership of what's happening in the lesson, in the learning, in the work done by their fellow students or the teacher themselves. So today we've investigated how we can do excellence beyond the success criteria. We've talked about the limitations of success criteria and examples of comparative examples. I looked at bringing things together and what I would like to see, the shared language that we could develop for what should actually be in a lesson. we've looked a little bit, and I think I could do more, but maybe if you want to investigate, you should do more reading on thinking about the problem of rubrics and mark schemes. I've asked you to think about excellence in terms of Berger's notion of ethic of excellence and Sadler's idea about excellence in our shared minds and how we make that visible. I've talked about excellent examples of work and moderation and the visualizer as this key tool. So next time we're going to look at questioning. Again, we're looking at Shirley Clarke's book, Outstanding Formative Assessment. And for my plenary, I'm just going to bring you back to Austin's Butterfly. And look at it and to think about what does a teacher need to do to take a student on a journey like this in terms of classroom culture, talk, success criteria, and ideas of excellence. What are you doing in your class to make something like this happen? Do you keep examples of student work to help articulate excellence in every unit that you teach? And I want you to think about, can you reflect on moments or examples when students have exceeded your success criteria to achieve success in new and original ways that might have changed your ideas of your pedagogical subject knowledge, even radically your subject knowledge itself, to make you rethink how it is that you could approach an issue or a problem. Because at that point, then we're truly into the space of something completely dialogic where the students are actually teaching you something too. So I hope you're enjoying these to some extent. I hope you can get a copy of Shirley Clarke's book. I'm here if you ever want to talk or debate any of these ideas. I look forward to hearing from you.